Okay, so we're getting ready to start chapter 6. By way of introduction, I want you to take a minute to think of 3 different things that you did this past weekend. 3 different actions, 3 different activities that you did during the weekend.
Still says your speaker is not working.
Okay, did it work last time you used it?
Yes.
Then
Now Kim did.
And now I want you to think, if you had to label each of those 3 items as good, bad, or neutral, how would you list each of those items? All right, does anyone want to share? Go ahead, Arlene.
To be honest, I could only think of 2. Isn't that sad? Unless you consider watching TV.
something broke.
That watching TV is fine. Eating,
Yeah.
sleeping, watching TV,
but
talking on the
good.
phone.
I take a drum cardio class that I love, and that's very
Put it up on
good.
my phone.
I went to
Okay.
a
You want
genealogy
to watch it on one of my computers?
class, and that was very good. So it was all in all good.
That's a lot of classes in one weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Anyone else?
I had a 2-hour-long conversation with a son that I'm not sure I've ever talked to for more than 10 minutes in his entire life, because he has Asperger's and is on the spectrum, and he just doesn't talk. And I'm not going to confirm or deny how many of those 120 minutes were me talking, but that was definitely, I think, the longest I've ever had been on the phone with him since he went away for college was about at most 20 minutes, but it was both my husband and I. So
Wow.
that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Almost life changing. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. He's doing so well.
So for that alone, it was worth sending him out of the house, huh?
Thank God he's a triplet. Baruch Hashem.
Wow.
He's turning into, his frontal lobe is approaching. He's becoming a real little human being. So that was great. Watching football was depressing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. When we started Tanya, we stated, and the introduction to Tanya states that the goal of the Tanya is very clearly to show us that incorporating Judaism in our day-to-day lives is close to us. It's possible. Now, throughout history, this was a real question for people. You could say once upon a time, the Jewish people, they were all together in the desert. They were living in Israel. They had a temple, whatever kind of sheltered life they lived in years past, it kind of made sense that Judaism could be, front and center in their lives. And as we move further and further away from that period, people get more involved in material pursuits and in business, and we become more integrated and incorporated into the world. And it becomes a real question, like, what role does Judaism play in my life? And this is obviously a question that the author of the Tanya dealt with a lot and got a lot from people, even in the 1700s. We feel that it's applicable today. But even then, this was like the age of the Enlightenment. Things were evolving and developing, and people were trying to figure out, like, to be a good Jew, do I need to lock myself up and like live in some bubble in a shtetl, in a ghetto? Like, how do I make this real to me? And his answer was unequivocally, yes, it could be part of your life. And it's very realistic for Judaism to be part of your real, modern, everyday, practical life. And I will show you how. And you don't have to remove yourself from day-to-day life. On the contrary, you could and you should be deeply involved in real, everyday, practical life. And you could bring your Judaism there with you. But he also made another comment in the introduction, not just it's possible and I'm going to show you, but he said, I'm going to show you how to do this in the long, short way. Many of you probably remember this expression. He said there's two ways to do things. There's the quick way, where it's like a quick fix. I'll teach you how to do it. You'll be all inspired. It's great. It won't really last. Or I can teach you a way it's going to take a little longer. It's going to be a little harder. But once you get it, you'll really get it. It'll be life changing and it'll be lasting. And that's kind of where the Tanya is going, that's kind of where the Tanya discussion begins. So we started off, the beginning of the Tanya is kind of laying down the groundwork for us in the first few chapters before it could start giving us, these actual techniques of how do we get onto this road to make Judaism relevant and real in our lives and enriching in our lives. And one of the breakthroughs that the Tanya introduced at the very beginning of chapter 1 is this idea of two souls. We say it so many times, especially in Tanya class, that we almost don't think it's a breakthrough, but it really is something very, very revolutionary in Judaism, as well as just in general. Most people tend to think of themselves as some version of split personality. Sometimes I want this and sometimes I want that. And there's a part of me that cares for this and there's a part of me that cares for the opposite. And the Tanya spent a lot of time describing that, no, it's actually, there's two parts of us living within me. And I'm being pulled in two opposite directions, not because I'm a split personality, because I actually have two souls, two powers, two drives inside of me that are both very, very powerful. And they each kind of take their turn pushing their agenda. Chapter 6 really brings about the next big, I don't know if you want to say breakthrough, but the next big idea that we've mentioned before, but we didn't elaborate on so much. And this idea is really lies at the crux of the Tanya's philosophy on life. And that's the idea of defining good, bad, and neutral in the world. Defining how we say, if I say I did something good, I did something not good, I'm doing something that's, in between. How do we define that? And redefining it by the Tanya's terms, it takes time and it takes effort, but once you get it, it really changes your worldview of how you view yourself and how you view your day-to-day interactions. So that's kind of what chapter 6 is going to focus on. If you remember, until now, we've been mostly speaking about this divine soul, the godly soul. We spoke about what it's made up of and how it expresses itself and how there's the intellectual part and the emotional part. Let's perhaps review it briefly. I'll show you the little model that we've used before we then compare, because chapter 6 is going to start by talking about the animal soul or the natural soul, which is the counterpart, the opposite counterpart of the godly soul. So most of you are probably familiar with this image. Let's see if I can make it a little bigger. There we go. So this is an overview of how we described the godly soul until now. We said that the godly soul has 10 powers, so to speak. The top 3 are the intellectual ones, the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Different ways to define the Chachma, Bina, and Dat, but basically telling us that the divine soul begins, our divine feelings and actions begin with a thought. We think something, we learn about it, we know it, we understand it. Once we understand something, that will lead us to develop feelings. That will lead us to develop feelings for this concept. And those feelings are, we have a whole range of, the Tanya describes 7 different emotions, which they can blend together to create many more than just 7, but generally they're the emotions of love and fear, or connection and awe and detachment. And all of these feelings together, once I start feeling for the concept, will then bring me to expression of the soul. And the expression, what the Tanya calls the garments of the soul, are the thought, speech, and action. So in godly concepts, if this is describing divine soul, so I learn a godly idea, I really think about it, I get inspired by it intellectually, and then I start feeling for it, and then I want to act on it. This is something we spoke about back in chapter 2. Then we went on to talk about the advantage of the garments. Like, what if I'm not feeling something? Would it be hypocritical for me to express thought, speech, and action of my godly soul if I'm not really feeling it? Like if I don't feel like doing something Jewish and I do it anyway, is there a benefit in that? And we said that actually it's amazing to do that. It's like it's like when I dress up for an event. I'll dress up in business attire, even if I don't feel very business-like, but I'm able to express and get in touch with that part of me, even if I'm not actually feeling it in the moment. So when a person puts on garments of holiness, when I do a mitzvah, whether I feel it or not, I'm able to connect to that part of me, even if it's not fully integrated inside me at the time. That was a discussion we had in chapter 4. In chapter 5, we had another whole discussion about, the advantage of using our intellect to really comprehend Torah, that when we study Torah, it gives us the ability to really contemplate godliness in our mind. This is all the discussion of the godly soul that we've had until now. Chapter 6, we want to say, all right, that's the godly soul. What does the animal soul look like? What's the other soul? And to introduce this, chapter 6 begins with a statement that actually the Tanya quotes very, very often. Let me share my screen here. Those of you who have the text of chapter 6, the very first word of chapter 6 are, in Hebrew, Ze le'umat ze asa Elokim, which means the Almighty has created one thing opposite the other. And the Tanya talks about this a lot and says that actually this world is very balanced. In order to really give us free choice, in order to really give us the ability to choose, everything is balanced. Everything that exists in holiness will exist in unholiness. Everything that has, power from the positive side, there'll also be something equal on the non-holy side.
Yellow shoes.
Sorry? And that's the way that our world remains balanced, and that we always have equal choice in making decisions. Now, the chapter 6 says, because the world is so balanced, therefore, just like we spend so much time describing the godly soul and its makeup, guess what? The natural soul or the animal soul has basically identical makeup. Just it's coming from the other side. So I'm just going to read a little bit inside where I have it highlighted here. Just as the divine soul consists of 10 holy faculties, sefirot, and is clothed in 3 holy garments, thought, speech, and action of Torah and mitzvot, so too the soul of the Sitra Achra, the soul from the other side, the natural soul, derived from Klipat Noga, which is another topic that we discussed another time, which is clothed in man's blood. As a side note, meaning that the actual natural soul, it's a spiritual soul. It's not actually in our blood. But the Tanya describes it like the touch point at which the soul connects to me physically is through the blood, meaning because it's my natural soul and it gives me all my natural desires. So it's described as living in the blood, meaning it kind of lives in the very physical part of me. It consists of 10 crowns of impurity, meaning 10 faculties that are impure. And these 10 faculties are the 7, my computer just had to pop up. These 10 faculties are the 7 evil midot, the 7 negative emotional traits, and the intellect, which gives birth to these, meaning the 3 intellectual capacities that give birth to the 7 emotional traits. This is basically describing what the natural soul looks like. So we're saying, it's just like the godly soul. The godly soul, we said, has 3 intellectual capacities, give birth to 7 different types of emotion, which then leads us to 3 different ways of expressing through action. Animal soul has exactly the same thing. It's a mirror image. We have both sides of us that are pretty much equal. Did anyone notice something interesting about the way it's phrased when describing the natural soul or the animal soul? If you notice, it kind of seems to say it a little backwards. It says that this animal soul also has 10 faculties. It's got the 7 emotions that are derived from the 3 intellectual capacities. I would think that it would say, no, it's got 3 intellectual capacities that then lead to 7 different types of emotional attributes that then bring about action. But the Tanya is very, very precise. And in this little nuance, it's really highlighting one of the key differences between the godly soul and the animal soul, or the divine soul and the natural soul.
Is
If you
it,
think about, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, is it the idea that our godly soul is more connected to the crown um parts or attributes, and that the animal soul is more connected to the emotionality and
100%.
the feeling?
Yes, 100%. And I think that we can all relate to that because, you know, we spent a lot of time saying in one of the previous classes that all emotion really comes from intellect, right? When I know something, I'll develop feelings for it. If I know how amazing you are, I'll start to love you. If I know how horrible something is for my health, I'll ultimately start resenting it because I know that it's really bad. But in real life, our experience doesn't always mirror that. I mean, how many times do I just want something because I want it? And I can't really explain. I didn't just sit and read a manual about why chocolate is so amazing. But guess what? I really want it. And I can't explain to you that there's like necessarily an intellectual process for me wanting this item. And we see that with a lot of things. Like we have a lot of like visceral responses, you know, to different things that we feel, and we don't really see an emotional connection. What the Tanya is highlighting here is, just like Lorraine said, that the main difference between the divine soul and the animal soul is that divinity really only comes through and is attained through intellect. Meaning, the average person will not wake up one morning and just say, oh, I'm in the mood of praying to God. That doesn't happen. When you study about God and you become inspired to connect to something higher, that can lead you to a feeling of wanting to engage in a spiritual and a holy behavior. And that really goes for anything, you know, any mitzvah. Think of a mitzvah. Like most people don't just, you know, wake up or just in the middle of the day just feel like I'm just in the mood of doing the mitzvah, unless of course it's something that they have studied about and they have great knowledge of. The natural soul operates differently. The natural soul is much more connected, like Lorraine said, to emotion, meaning I feel like doing X, Y, and Z. I want to do this. I'm attracted to something specific. And very often the emotion is what we feel first. However, the Tanya is still saying the same structure still exists. There's still the intellect at top, there's the emotion in the middle, and there's the action afterwards. But it's not so clean, so to speak, with the natural soul. With the godly soul, it's very clear. I study it, I understand it, I feel for it, and then I act on it. With the natural soul, it works more like this. I feel it, and once I feel it, I go back to my intellect. Why do I need my intellect? Well, either A, I need my intellect to figure out how to get it. I saw, you know, something I really wanted, and now I need to figure out how am I going to get that thing. So I kind of go back to my intellect to help my emotion really get to where it wants to get to. That's one way it's connected. The other way that it's connected is, you know, we all know the English word justify. You know, once I want something, I can give you 1,000,001 reasons why that thing is really, really good for me. But I didn't start with the intellect. I started with the emotion, and now suddenly I'm going to use my intellect to really explain why it's really a good thing and why this is what I should be doing. And maybe I need to justify it to someone else as well. Let's give it a basic example. Let's give 2 examples. So let's say in terms of kosher, right? I'm trying to keep kosher and a food item is served in front of me and I'm really hungry and it smells really good. And there's a chance it's kosher. There's also a chance it's not kosher. Very often, what's going to happen, I'm going to sit there at that moment and I will come up with 1,000,001 reasons why I should really eat this. because probably, you know, there's a good chance that it's kosher, and the chances of it not being kosher are probably not such good chances. And anyway, if I don't eat it, I might offend the host, or I might offend the other person, you know, and suddenly I have so many reasons why I'm not making a very, let's just say this decision that I'm going to make now is going to be very biased, because it started with emotion. Once my emotion's in it, it's very hard for me to think objectively. I mean, think about trying to talk to someone who's really angry or in a really bad mood. You know, someone got really offended at something. And we always say, let's wait some time, let them cool off, let them like distance themselves from it a little bit so that we can talk about it. Because if the emotion's already ignited, then the brain is just going to follow the emotion. Like, you can't even speak logically to someone who's emotionally attached to something. Another example, let's say you have someone who's in desperate need of money. They're reaching the end of the month, their bank's going to overdraft, and they know that they really need money. Someone comes and offers them a business deal. Let's just say the business deal has some questionable elements to it about it, how moral it is exactly. Some questions. It's not clearly, a dishonest deal, but it's, if you examine it enough, you see that it actually has some holes in it. To this person at this moment who desperately needs the money, they could probably come up with a dozen different reasons why they should still take the deal, and it won't really be dishonest. Because, well, if the other party actually reads the fine print, then they'll really know I'm not really hiding anything from them. Or, really, in some states it is legal, just happens to be in my state it's not legal, a lot of different justifications. Of course, if they call up their friend who's not in a financially desperate situation and they say, here, can you read this deal and tell me if it's honest? Their friend in a second will tell them, no, this is dishonest, don't do it. But because they're already emotionally connected to it, then their intellect is just following the emotion. So what the Tanya is telling us is that the basic structure still stands, intellect and emotion, both in the godly soul and the divine soul and in the natural animal soul. However, in the godly soul, it must start with intellect. And in the animal soul, it typically starts with emotion. Now, I could work on my intellect to then influence my emotion, even in the animal soul. So for example, if we know someone who's in a relationship and everyone around this person knows that this relationship is really bad for them, this person is just not good for them for, many reasons. It's so clear to everyone except the person who's in the relationship. Try to talk to them about it and they have no idea what you're talking about. You don't understand. I'm in love. They're amazing. Everything's fantastic. The only way you can really get them to start thinking rationally is if they kind of distance themselves emotionally. Maybe they go on vacation for a week without this person and they're able to spend some time in a different environment. They kind of distance themselves emotionally and then they have some clarity and they're able to think more rationally and more intellectually and realize that actually my family and friends are right. I really need to drop this. So their intellect could still and will still influence the emotion, but the emotion is so much stronger. And the emotion, unless we're very mindful about it, the emotion could drive the intellect instead of the other way around. Any thoughts or questions about this difference or similarity between the two souls? Yes, Sarah.
Okay, I don't know if it was last time or not, so I apologize if I'm recalling old analogies or if this was this round. You had referenced the structure would be that the brain is above physically above the heart, in which is not it's not an accident that is one above the other in terms of allowing the intellect to overrule the heart. Is that connected to this, or is that?
Yeah, no, 100%. It actually connects beautifully because what we're saying is the reason it's called the animal soul, right? We say, why does Tanya call it animal soul? Why doesn't it just call it the natural soul? The animal soul is because that's exactly how an animal operates. If you see the physical structure of an animal is where the brain and the heart are on an equal level, right? The way an animal stands, brain and heart are basically, one parallel to the other instead of one above the other. In a human, we stand with our head above our heart. And the Tanya points out that this symbolizes the idea that humans have the ability to exercise their intellect in order to control and direct the heart. The animal soul operates like an animal, the same way an animal's, it's not bad. It's just about me, survival. So if I don't plug in my ability to use intellect and I just follow my animal soul, which is just following the heart, then I'll be making decisions the way an animal makes decisions, just by instinct. If I want to exercise my distinct human capacity to have my mind overrule my heart, it's going to take work. But only humans have the ability to do that, right? I've never met a dog on a diet, right? Like they can't decide on their own, I'm going to do something despite what I'm feeling.
So, and this was my question. Sorry, Lorraine. This was my question, and I know you have the Chabad, Hasidus background, but I'm wondering if it's. Do you know if this is the reverse for Breslov? Is it possible that their push is that basically your emotions will lead to the intellect?
So that's interesting.
This is what I've heard. I don't know.
So I wouldn't say Breslov specifically, but I would say that in the origins of the Hasidic movement, starting with the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov introduced the concept of tapping into Kabbalistic teachings, which really arouses the human emotion. So just some background for those who are not familiar, I would say in the late 1600s, Hasidic teachings and study of Kabbalah were not common among Jews. And the Baal Shem Tov was really the one who introduced this concept of Hasidic teachings, where he was taking bits of Kabbalah and bringing it out to the masses so people get in touch with that deeper part of Judaism. And his goal was to really awaken people and inspire them and arouse. And he was known, and his followers were known for being happy and joyous, and like they were just living more deeply, more happily. The author of the Tanya, who was one of the disciples that followed, he said, I want to take this idea and I want to create an intellectual work of it. I don't want it to remain these little snippets of inspiration, because inspiration is great, but it's here today and gone tomorrow. I could listen to a speech or listen to a song and become so inspired, and then whatever, something else comes up and I forget about it. Whereas when I study something intellectually and I really understand it, it really changes me from the inside. So when he wrote the Tanya and started the Chabad philosophy of Hasidic teachings, until today, the main difference between the Chabad philosophy and all other Hasidic teachings is that all other Hasidic teachings really focus on bite-sized inspiration. You won't find a lot of academics in Hasidic teachings. We talk about that little figurine of the dancing Hasid, right? The little guy with the side curls, and he's dancing and he's all happy, and like it's great, but it's the Chabad philosophy is great. Be happy, it's all good, but take the time to really understand and comprehend so that it becomes really a part of you, not just something you engage in. So I imagine that, in Breslov they study, but it's not the same. They study little bite-sized pieces that are like really inspiring, and then they go dancing in the street, and then they're on to the next thing. So I would say that's probably the difference there.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Yes, Lorraine.
That was so interesting. So I think it's a question. My aha moment is actually a question. It's not truly an aha yet. But I think what I'm hearing you say is if we are doing an action And we find ourselves needing to justify what we've done. Like there's some tiny piece of us that's like, well, I just did that just this, once, or, oh, I didn't mean it that way. Or if not you, if we find ourselves justifying, are we acting from our animal soul?
So
Because what I thought when you were talking was, I've never justified lighting the candles with my boys, but I've justified, and then my mind went, lots of things, right? Lots of things. So is that what you're saying? I'm going to be
So
quiet.
I wouldn't say as a rule that every time you're justifying it's is because from your animal soul, but I will say that it's worth, like, it's good introspection. When I do something, let me take a minute to think, why am I actually doing this? And many times we actually will surprise ourselves. Many times when you keep asking the why, you realize that I'm actually doing it for a very good reason. Why did I go out with my friend for lunch? Because I wanted to spend time with her. Why do I want to spend time with her? Because I know she's going through a hard time. Why do I care that she's going through a hard time? Because, I want her to do better. And then suddenly I ask all these questions and I get to my core value and I realize that was actually a very good thing that I did. Yes, it was a lot of fun to go out for lunch with her, but really my driving reason here was to help somebody. So it doesn't always mean that when I figure out how to justify it, that it was a bad thing. But sometimes if I'm very honest with myself, I realize that actually the reason I went out with her was not really because I cared about her, but really because I don't know, I wanted someone to split the lunch bill with, whatever. So if we're honest with ourselves, I think we're able to really understand what our whys are and what's really driving our actions. Arlene.
When we perform an action, we're not aware at the time whether it's an action that we're performing spontaneously through emotion or whether it's something we thought about, intellectualized, and then, you do something, but I think the processes that precede it are not distinct processes for every action. Oh, well, I know that I intellectually thought about this before I felt like doing it, and then I did it. So, I don't know, I guess justifying almost sounds like you've done something that you feel like, I need to I need to make it sound okay. I mean, but you do, everything you do comes from, I don't know, it's hard for me to explain it, but if you do something really fine, you still even may think about it, and yeah, that's.
So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think the idea is not so much to be thinking backwards, but to be thinking forward, meaning to be mindful about my actions. When I'm making a decision to do something, I'm making, right now I need to make a moral decision specifically about something. Then to think, all right, well, there's a part of me that wants to do A and there's a part of me that wants to do B. Let me examine for myself, like, what's driving my decision here? Is my decision being driven just by emotion, by the thing that I want? Or is the decision being driven by what I know is the right thing? Now, you know what an interesting litmus test is? Is time. The animal soul doesn't like to wait on decisions. It wants something and it wants it now. And probably on a deeper level, the reason it wants it now is because it doesn't want me to think about it too much. Because maybe if I think about it too much, I'm going to come up with reasons why I shouldn't be doing this. Whereas the godly soul or the divine soul doesn't care about time. The truth is truth. Morality is morality. It's not going to change if I wait 30 minutes. So sometimes if I'm trying to figure out if the decision I'm about to make is a right one, maybe I should think to myself, well, let me give myself 30 minutes. Let me think about it. Or let me come back to this soon and see if I still think the same thing. And that will help me really realize, is this just something coming out of just pure desire, or is it something that is really an intellectual decision that I'm making? But the other part of this chapter that we haven't touched upon yet is, what are these actions of the animal soul? You know, we're saying the animal soul is the unholy soul. What would I think are the garments or the expressions of the animal soul? I would think, you know, being dishonest, hurting somebody, you know, all these other things that we all agree morally are negative things. The question is, what about the neutral stuff? Like eating breakfast. Which soul is that expressing? Is eating breakfast expressing my godly soul or my animal soul? Is watching TV expressing my godly soul or my animal soul? Is going shopping expressing my godly soul or my animal soul?
Animal soul, those are all wants.
Animal soul, those are all wants. You're right. You're 100% right. But I will say that that is actually, it's a breakthrough of Tanya. And if you think about it, it sounds very extreme. People say, what do you mean? So it's actually bad? Is eating breakfast bad? Is shopping bad? Are we putting shopping and eating breakfast in the same category as theft and murder? Like those are all animal soul things and godly soul is only mitzvahs and holy things? And take that a step further, it sounds pretty scary when I think about, wait, so does God want me to just be, I don't know, an angel, like full-time doing mitzvahs and studying Torah, and there's no room in life for going shopping or doing business or eating out or sleeping or anything else?
Balance.
Okay. You want to explain that?
I mean, I don't know, but I don't think Hashem wants us to be 100% either. Balance.
Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna,
Lady. Oh.
I was just, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say necessities. There are some things that need to be done that are part of living, you know, and eating is part of that. You know, shopping, you need to acquire things, perhaps how you shop and where you shop or whatever, but just the act, there are certain acts that just are required to live.
So is there any room for like vacation?
Sure.
But
The
maybe that's
kind of
not,
your vacation you make perhaps will determine which part of which soul was the impetus for it. But yeah, I think so.
You might do all your praying on vacation because you finally have time.
okay. Lorraine, what do you say?
I was just gonna say that I think it depends on your action. And so if you pray before you eat, you've elevated the action of eating to a godly level because you've brought God into your meal. You've invited God into your life. If you're shopping and while you're shopping, you buy clothing for someone who you know can't afford it, or you clothe the poor while you clothe yourself, then you've elevated a very mundane action to a godly action.
Now I know that Lorraine's been in Tanya for a long time.
Exactly. Yes.
There's a
Thanks.
there's a famous story, an anecdote really, from the Kutzker Rebbe, who was asked, "Where is God?" And his response was, "Wherever he's allowed in." That really expresses the idea that the Tanya describes here in chapter 6, where the Tanya really says there is no neutral. There is godliness, and then there is the other side. The other side is not bad. The world is not defined as we typically define it as good and bad. There is what's godly, and that is something purely done for God. And then there's something that's just not done for God. It's done for me, for self, for pleasure, for anything else. Every action is basically either revealing God or obscuring God. If it is done for the purpose of holiness, it's revealing godliness. If it's not done for the purpose of holiness, it's obscuring godliness. If it's done for me, for myself, then it's about me. It's not about God. Now, it is extreme, but it's not necessarily extreme in the day-to-day actions. It's just the way of viewing the world. Every action that we do within what we will typically call neutral, any neutral action could be done for God or for other or for me. So I can go on vacation because I am going on vacation because I am very overwhelmed and I need to be a better mother for my kids. And I want to give them a more peaceful, loving home. And part of that is me going on vacation, whether it's myself or with my spouse or with my kids. But that's the intent of my vacation, to come back as a better mother for my children. Guess what? That vacation just became godly. As long as obviously I'm not doing anything forbidden on the vacation, but if the vacation is just all neutral stuff, right? Like, swimming and eating and spending time with friends, I don't have to be praying. But the intent of the vacation was for a holy reason, and the entire vacation was now elevated as a positive thing. If I'm going shopping, if I'm just going shopping because I don't know, I'm just in the mood of nice clothes and I just want to go and have fun. So it's not bad, but it's not holy. If I am going shopping because, maybe I'm going to buy clothes that I need to celebrate Shabbat and the holidays. Or maybe I'm going shopping because I'm taking a friend who can use an afternoon shopping. Or there's so many different ways to do it, but it's really the mindset with which I'm engaging in this action. And the Tanya's approach is that every single action that we take could be done in a holy way. And it all comes with intention. There's a story about Rabbi Shalom Dovber of Lubavitch. When he was a young boy, he tells a story. He was a young boy and he had a brother. He spent a lot of time. I actually think I read somewhere that his brother's yahrzeit is this week. Don't quote me on that one. I think so. Anyway, he spent a lot of time having these conversations with his brother when he was a little boy. He said one day they were sitting in the yard and they were having a long discussion about people and their intent and, which people are better than other people, and just a whole discussion. Their father overheard their discussion and he wanted to teach them a lesson. So he said, "Come here, boys, I want you to sit with me while we have this interaction." And he says, "Please go call Ivan, the guy who worked in the house." He was a Russian man who worked in the house. And he came over and he said, "Ivan, how you doing? How was your day? So tell me, Ivan, why do you work so hard?" He says, "I work so hard so I can make a living." He's like, "All right, so then why do you need to make a living?" He said, "Because I want to be able to support myself and have enough money." "And why do you need enough money?" "So that I can go out to the bar and drink with my friends and just have a good life." "All right, thank you, Ivan," and they sent him off and wished him well. Then they called another guy who worked in the house. His name was Ben Sion. He was a pretty simple Jew. And I said, "Ben Sion, how's your day? So tell us, Ben Sion, why do you work so hard?" Ben Sion said, "I work so hard so I can make a living." "And why do you work? Why do you have to make a living?" He said, "Because I want to be able to support my family." "And why do you need to support your family?" He's like, "So that we can continue to serve God and continue to do more mitzvahs." And he said, "Thank you very much." And, he sent him off. And then he turned to his kids and he said, "Everyone's engaging in the same actions, more or less. Everyone is working because they want to live, because they want to survive. The question is, though, what's my deeper intent here? Where am I, when I ask myself the whys and why and why and why, where do I get to at the end? Is it ultimately about me so that I should be able to go out and enjoy a good drink at the bar? Or is it ultimately about God, about bringing more godliness to the world? Whether it's, the reason why I spend time on my family or spend time on my friends or spend time on my business. I mean, how many people spend so much time invested in their business? Not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to ask yourself, why am I working so hard? Is it so that I should be able to provide for my family. Why do I want to provide for my family? I want to give kids a good education. I want to ensure that they have a Jewish education. I want to be able to give charity. I want to be able to help others. When we ask ourselves those whys, we can get to the mindset behind it. And you realize that almost any action that you take could be done in a godly way. If I am investing a lot in business so that I should be able to give charity, guess what? My entire business just became a holy pursuit. It is not any less holy than someone who's sitting and praying all day. There's a term that we've used before that comes in now again, and the term is bittul. Anyone heard the term bittul? Bittul, it literally means subservience. The Tanya uses bittul a lot to describe this idea. Is what I'm doing, is it ultimately about me, or is it about God? And I can ask myself that about anything. Is the action that I'm taking now, is it revealing godliness, or is it obscuring godliness? You know, say I see a really nice car and I want to go and buy that car. Is it possible for me to buy a really fancy car that I could afford and buy it honestly? Is it possible for me to buy it in a godly way? I need to ask myself, what's my reason for going to buy this car? Is it just lust? Like I really want this car and it just gives me pleasure? So then it's hard to say that that's a godly act. That's a self-serving act. That's definitely animal soul. But perhaps, you know, I could spend time and think about what is there a godly way to use this car? Oh, wait, maybe if I'm sure there is a way. I haven't been in this position exactly, but I'm sure there is a way. And I'm sure that there are people who invest in beautiful, fancy cars, and it's not all about self. There really is a higher purpose to it. There really is a godly, spiritual reason to it. And it's just about being mindful of it and having that mindset. And that's really, when we say, know God in all your ways, that's what we're talking about. Because otherwise, when I say know God in all my ways, how do I know God when I'm, eating, sleeping, shopping, and working? It kind of seems like I could know God in the synagogue and then know God when I'm lighting Shabbat candles. And when I'm doing mundane things, it's just, I don't know, it's just other. And when we really internalize this concept and this mindset, we realize that actually my entire life could be godly without me living in a synagogue all day. It's not easy. It takes a lot of intent and mindfulness, but I could live my life in a very mindfully godly and spiritual way when I take the time before every action that I do to really think, is this for me or is this for God? There's the one of the terms used is, am I being a channel? Like, am I being, we spoke a lot in Tanya about how we say that God is everything. At the core of everything is godliness, right? Some things reveal the godliness in them. I look at something holy and I know this is godly, and some things don't look godly. And the Tanya describes them as klipa. They've got like a husk, a shell. There's like something that's obstructing the godliness. I could think of myself as well and my actions. Am I being a channel for godliness through this action? Or am I blocking godliness through this action? Am I just being a channel for self? Or am I being translucent? Am I showing spirituality? Am I revealing spirituality through these actions? Any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So are you saying that every single thing that we do, every day, our goal should be to think about it before we do it and make sure it's godly and never just do something for our own pleasure?
That is definitely the ultimate goal. But then you also have to think when you say not just to do something for our own pleasure, I think you have to break that down a little bit, meaning me being a rested, relaxed, and happy person could be a way of serving God. So I wouldn't say not to do it for my own pleasure, but not to do it just out of lust, but to do it to think, well, I want to do something for myself. Why do I want to do something for myself? Is it just because I want to give in to my desires? Or is it because I want to be a healthier person? I want to be a better partner. I want to be a better parent, grandparent. I want to be able to dedicate myself to more spiritual things. And in order to do that, I know that I need to take some time for myself every day. So it's what you're saying is right. But at the same time, if we don't, we really have to like break it down and internalize it to understand that it is doable and it doesn't contradict living a good life. All it really means is that I'm taking every element of my life and uplifting it. So some things it's easy to do with, and some things it's not so easy. I mean, maybe there's a part of my life that I think, how do I make that godly? And typically, if we think about it, we could find a way, with intention to make that part of our life godly too. If there's something that we're doing in our lives that we can't think at all of any way to make it godly, so then maybe it's not something I should be engaging in. And something we've discussed previously, and actually it's brought again at the end of this chapter, is that the world is generally divided, according to Kabbalah, into 3 categories. There's the holy, there's the neutral, so to speak, which is everything we've been discussing, which is all the things that could be used in the right way and could be used in the wrong way. And then there is a small sliver of the universe that God created that he said, this is the unholy part that just don't engage in. For example, pork. The Torah says that pork is not holy. It's not allowed. We're basically being told there's no way you can elevate this. Make all the blessings in the world, give as much charity with it as you want. There's no way for you to take this and make it holy. It's a pretty small sliver of things that the Torah defines as this is the stuff that cannot be made holy. The vast majority of our everyday activities can be made holy. School, work, relationships, activities, leisure activities, but it takes a lot of mindfulness. It's actually interesting that the Tanya speaks so much about mindfulness in this text. Today, mindfulness is like such a common term and everyone's using mindfulness and, be mindful about what you're doing and think about it, and it's something that the Tanya expressed many years ago, that it's a basic core value of Judaism. When I live mindfully, I can elevate and uplift every single part of my life. How much better will I feel when I'm on vacation and I know I'm on this vacation and there's like a really good reason for this vacation? It feels different than when I'm just on vacation just to indulge. It doesn't make it less enjoyable. It just makes it more uplifting and more meaningful. Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay. Pork. So to my knowledge, the only restriction that there would be for non-Jews is if it's part of a living animal, in which case, if it's not a part of a living animal, it's not one of the 7 laws of Noah, in which case, why wouldn't I, this happens to me every Thanksgiving at Tom Thumb. If you buy X dollars, you get a free turkey. And I always make a point to say, a free turkey, cool. Like, let me go bring it to charity fill in the blank, right? Because it's a free turkey and I'm going to elevate a not kosher or, product. And I'm doing a mitzvah to it. True, I'm not helping a Jew at that moment, but I am still helping God's creatures. And that should, how does that not, and I know this is going back to the word justify, but yeah, you can justify that.
Yeah, no, so 100%. I should have been more clear. In the things that are not allowed is not allowed for a Jew specifically to engage in. The concept that the Tanya talks about here, in general terms, applies to all humanity. All humanity could really benefit from doing things in a more divine, in a more spiritual way, in a more refined and mindful way. The Jewish people specifically were given much more clear and narrow directives of not just do things, not just be good and keep these 7 laws, but actually you need to be increasing godliness and spirituality in the world. And we're told specifically that there's certain things that are off limits for us and not within our department to elevate. So yes, I mean, I'm not a rabbi, but I definitely think that giving away a turkey to charity to a non-Jewish person is a mitzvah. You did something good.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thoughts, questions, comments? I will say if I had to give like an exercise for the week or meditation for the week, I think that we can all just take time to think, how can I elevate more of my activities? Think of activities that I engage in on a regular basis. Exercising, sleeping, eating, spending time with friends and family. How can I take those activities and be more, sometimes, like we said, I'm actually, when I dig into it, I realize I'm actually doing it for a good reason, but maybe I want to bring that reasoning to the forefront. So I am more mindful of it. And before I engage in the activity, to actually think, I'm about to do this activity and I'm actually doing it for this reason. And then it kind of brings it to the forefront. And then I know that I'm actually doing a mitzvah while I'm doing this activity. And that kind of goes along the same lines of how do I live my life with more bittul? The word bittul that we said, it's the same idea. How can I live my life in a way that's I'm more transparent to the godliness? I am revealing godliness with every action that I'm taking and not, God forbid, obscuring it. Arlene.
I think you just kind of addressed it, but I mean, I was thinking if you're doing something, an activity that you do regularly, and then you stop and think, well, how is this a godly thing? So then do you then perhaps create a way that it can be seen as godly?
It's all about the intent. It's all about the intent. If you are doing it with the intent of doing something godly, you have just taken a mundane activity and made it a godly activity.
And you hadn't had that intent. I mean, you were just doing it because you like to do it,
Right. So now that you'll do it more mindfully, you're actually turning it into a mitzvah.
You just have to find the intent.
Yeah. And you have to take that moment to be
Right.
intentional about it.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it really changes how it really refines us as people. Think of the person who, has a plate of food put in front of them and it's like, oh my God, this tastes good. And like, just dig in. And then compare that to someone who takes a moment to say, like, assuming that it's all kosher, right? Takes a moment to say, well, I'm going to enjoy this meal so that later I could take that energy and use it to study Torah. So that I can take the relaxation and the joy I'm getting from this meal and then be a better mom to my kids. And the possibilities are endless. But when I take a moment to be mindful in that way, I become a more refined person. I actually think about what I do more and I'm more intentional about everything that I do. And it's less about self. There's another whole discussion in the Tanya, I'm sure we'll get to another time, how it seems to be very distinct when I say neutral things and then things that are clearly bad. Typically, most people don't start off doing something bad. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to rob the bank. But when I don't spend time being mindful and having that bittul, and I'm very focused on self, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm in the mood, I become desensitized to what's holy. And my main driving force becomes self. And so then when I'm running low on money in the bank and I'm only focused on self, I'm more likely then to do something not so honest. I'm not robbing the bank, but maybe something like slightly dishonest because I'm so focused on just self and what I need and what I want. And no one becomes a bank robber overnight, but it started off with one small dishonest thing and something a little more dishonest and something a little more dishonest. And before they knew it, they were so absorbed in self and in getting what they need and attaining what they're trying to get to that they reached a pretty far place. It really, a lot of it starts with that self-indulgence and being mindful about what I'm doing and making sure that what I'm doing is not to feed self, but really to reveal godliness in the world, really helps keep me on that more refined path of living. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Feel free to stay on if you still have questions or want to talk.
I have one more.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
Night, everybody. So I heard two different things about intent and how it's going to affect this, and I just want to make sure I understood. So intent is not enough. You have to then use that action to bring godliness into the world, not just having a mindset of something. It sounded like you added on like a 3-piece instead of a 2-piece. I thought it was our intent could make an action godly. But the last example with the kosher food was not just the intent to keep kosher and to eat the kosher food, but that with that energy, I then go and study and bring godliness there. It was a 3-part. So I'm trying to figure out, does it need to transmute like through you into the world, or is it enough that you're thinking I'm bringing godliness into the world?
So
If that makes
thanks-
sense.
Yeah, no, thanks for clarifying that. I think that depends on the action. If sometimes the intent is that I'm going to use the energy from this activity to do something positive. So that's where the intent lies. Obviously, assuming that you will actually go ahead and try to do that. I'm not just fantasizing, right? I know that I'm actually really going to go to sleep afterwards, but I'm just going to pretend that I'm going to use this energy for something positive. And sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes this activity itself, I know, will bring me the peace of mind that I need to do X. So I don't think it has to come with an action afterwards. I think very often it does.
Okay.
It's like, how am I revealing godliness through this action?
Okay. So it can be either 2 or 3 steps.
Yes.
Okay.
It could be that just by doing this action, I know that I am setting a great example for someone. And this itself is going to be revealing godliness in the world. Just by everyone seeing that, I don't know, a Jewish person is doing X, Y, and Z.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because in the mother story too, it was a 3-step.
So I think very often that's like a very natural way to take a basic action and turn it to something godly. It's like, if I can't figure out how I'm going to reveal godliness through this action, it's like, well, I could use the energy or the peace of mind or, whatever it is from this activity to then do something godly afterwards. And we all need it. I mean, a good night's sleep means I'll be able to wake up and pray in the morning, or I'll be able to, be more available to help somebody because guess what? My good night's sleep just became holy. So
Wow.
go get a
Wow,
good night's sleep.
that's so cool. Like I started saying Modeh Ani when I started class with you 3 years ago. So I had like a lot of years of unholy sleep. Like that's fascinating to me. Anyway. Okay, I know you need to get a good night's sleep. Speaking of. Thank
Good
you.
night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Jeannie.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Thank you.